Hi, What the Health Tech listeners. I'm your host this week, Justine Abson. This is the podcast where we tackle some of the trending topics, ideas and best practice across health and social care. This week, I'm talking to Linda Boabeng. Linda has been in healthcare for the last 15 years, starting as a paediatric nurse before moving into the world of governance, quality and compliance. She has worked for King's College Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, Cromwell Hospital and Cleveland Clinic in the UK, as well as spending some time in the Middle East, and previously a steering committee member for the RCN Leadership Management Group. As an experienced regulatory specialist and with a passion for patient safety, Linda is now focused on strategic management and leadership, helping nurses and frontline professionals to develop into senior roles within healthcare. Linda, quite an intro. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, when you were just saying that, I was just thinking, wow, that is a lot that I've done in the last 15 years. But yeah, no, I qualified as a paediatric nurse, what feels like many moons ago, and I worked in the NHS and a number of roles there before I moved on to Saudi Arabia, which was a really insightful experience. But it also gave me my first insight into quality and safety, because the hospital that I worked at was very much accreditation, quality accreditation focused. So from then, I was thinking, what could I do then? And that led me into roles within quality and safety and governance.
I mean, it is an amazing background. I mean, working in Saudi Arabia must have been incredibly different to your previous roles in the NHS as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what actually made me go there is because I always feel like nurses, we get to a point and we're like, we get itchy feet. We want to kind of move, whether it be Australia, it can be a new role. And my itchy feet was going to the Middle East. I didn't know anybody. I just decided, actually, let me just go and see what it was like. So I look back and think, wow, you're really brave.
I agree.
Yeah. But it was a great experience. I was senior staff nurse on a paediatric ward. But as I was saying, I gained the insight into quality and how we, as an organisation, when I worked there, how we gear up for inspections, accreditations, and it was really fascinating to me. So that opened my mind in that sense.
Did you bring a lot of that insight back into then when you came back to the UK and you were going into your new roles back over here? Was that something that you could sort of
Yes. In one way, in the sense that because the hospital where I worked at in the Middle East was very much American model, so the focus was on the American accreditation. But in terms of quality and understanding, good governance and things like that, that remains the same, essentially. So for me, it was really insightful to just kind of build on that knowledge in the UK, which is what I wanted to do. And it was really helpful at that time.
Yeah, that leads really nicely into your passion for patient safety is so clear. I mean, we've had a few conversations in the run up to this episode. Where does that come from, and kind of what made you move into the consultancy space that allows you to really focus on that?
I guess I have to take it all the way back into my exposure into nursing. And that was when my younger sister was born, and she was an ex-prem, 28 weeks.
Oh, wow.
But so at the time I was really young, 7 or 8, but I noticed how, the medical team cared for her. But in particular, the nurses, they were her advocate day in, day out, and I witnessed that. And for me, I was like, wow. I didn't know exactly what it was at the time. I was just like, I want to be a nurse. I want to be a nurse. I don't know how, but I will be a nurse. And that led my passion and being an advocate. And then kind of like fast forward into the governance spaces now, what I really wanted to do was be in the senior roles to really influence and be an advocate for change, because that's where I feel the decisions are within the senior level. So I really am big on kind of representation in senior roles of women, of Black minorities in the spaces. Hence why I've kind of moved on to opening up my own consultancy where I do support organisations within patient safety and governance, but also developing future nurses. So I have a lot of nurses reach out to me in developing and wanting to develop in governance and understand patient safety and how they can progress as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that sort of the reason you became or went into nursing in the first place is because of something you saw, which does just show you can have that view of people, like, and almost, sort of allow people to go, actually, I really want to do that. I've seen you caring and that's what I want to do. That, those nurses will have no idea that impact made you to become a nurse, which I think is a really special thing, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember actually going there and seeing the nurses and, touching my sister when she was in the incubator, and they're just touching it, and the nurses were just talking to me. And I felt, they're advocating for patient safety in a way to ensure that my sister comes home.
Yeah.
In that respect. And that was nice. But at the time I was young, I didn't know. But on reflection, I can look back and think, wow, that was so impactful. And I always remember that throughout my nursing career.
Oh, I think that's incredible. I mean, you touched on there that, you do quite a lot of work in the Black minority space, and you're really passionate about changing things when it comes to bias, in an area where diversity, equality, inclusion are all at the forefront of everything that we want to do. Can you tell me a bit more about the work you're doing to change the narrative within the healthcare profession?
Yeah, sure. So within one of my roles, I was the chair of the Black Minority and Ethnic Employee Resource Group, and that was at Cleveland Clinic London. And within that, it was a new organisation that started, and I really wanted to provide and encourage Black professionals within the workplace to have a safe space to talk, discuss, if they want career advice. And I felt it was really important at the time for me to do that, because it was kind of alongside the Black Lives Matter movement that was going on as well. And that opened doors. I was part of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and we really championed change. And it felt like a grassroots, it was by us. We wanted to see what we wanted to see within the organisation, and it led to really wonderful things happening. I also was part of reverse mentoring, where our exec team were reverse mentored by Black professionals in the workplace. So it really was a great time, and the feedback from my colleagues was that we feel part of the team, we feel included. And for me, that's inclusion, and that's acknowledging that, sometimes people may be quiet, Black professionals may be quiet in the workplace, but they do have a lot to say, and it's creating those safe environments for them to speak up as well, and also ensuring that it's psychologically safe to do so. So I really do encourage that within the work that I do as well.
I think that you're right, that is such an important aspect of it. We've just touched on the fact that why you became a nurse and the impact that, somebody had on you. So to think that you're possibly having that impact on, maybe a younger colleague or something like that is again, it's something that needs to happen across the profession. So I think it's a really important thing that you're leading that, and it is something that you're so passionate about as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I remember one of the other things when I was studying as a nurse is I remember seeing a nurse, a Black nurse, a happy nurse, just walking along the corridor, and I was like, oh my gosh, where have you been? So she's now my best friend.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah, I was like, there's no way you're leaving here and I don't know who you are. So we've been friends for 15 years, but her impact on me, she's like, to this day, I don't even remember walking across the corridor and you seeing me. But it was so impactful because that was the representation I needed. And I always believe in paying it forward. She doesn't know that she's paid it forward for me, so I would like to pay it forward as well, and just encourage nurses to be the best they can be, and encourage nurses from Black professionals to go into senior roles and feel supported and be able to develop within their career as well.
And I think that is, your consultancy that you've got, you're helping nurses with their professional development, and it sounds so rewarding. So what are you doing to help them with this and I guess allow them to be the best they can?
So recently, probably over the last 6 months, I've really focused on creating short form content. So I have social media platforms that I raise awareness and share information on governance, assurance, what nurses I feel should know but may not necessarily know. And that has really taken off in the sense that I've really connected with so many nurses to say, wow, I wanted to get into governance, but I don't know how. This links so nicely into patient safety work that I want to do. And I create one-to-ones. So I have a platform that nurses, whoever wants to get in touch, can just have a free one-to-one and connect with me, and then we'll talk and we discuss what they'd like to achieve in their careers as well. So from the social media, I've connected with the nurses, fantastic nurses across the UK who usually are at the point of the career where, they feel that they're not being listened to or heard, and they want to progress, but they don't know how to. And I always advocate, I say, don't leave nursing. There's so many opportunities. There's so much that you can do within the space. It's just understanding where and how you can do it. So it's been brilliant for me. I mean, even yesterday I connected with a great nurse who we're going through pre-interview coaching, and, she's like, I really want this role and things like that. And I said, you know what, let's go through governance and your understanding, and maybe I can help you fill in the gaps so you feel confident at interview and things like that. And I think for me, it's just important that I can help create a network of informed, potentially governance professionals, but also nurses who feel empowered to put patient safety at the forefront through assurances, governance, and things like that. So, yeah.
I think you're right, though, because there's so many roles now within healthcare, nursing.
Absolutely.
It's not just a nursing role. There's, chief nursing information officers. There's a lot in the digital space. There's so many areas that if you've been in it a while, and like you said, you sort of, these things are going on, but you just need to understand how you can get there, or what's available, or what the pathway is, or anything like that. I think to have that network, like you said, of people that may be trying to do similar things to you or have the same passions, and to be able to connect that together is, it must be so rewarding when, you find out they've got the job.
Oh, that is the best feeling. It really is. And even just last week, one of the nurses, bless her, she was so sweet. They were like, I want to take you out. I really want to take you to dinner. I was like, no, it's fine. You've got the role. I'm happy with that. But she sent me flowers and a thank you card. And honestly, I was just so touched because I really do genuinely feel like my purpose is to help and to try and support and encourage nurses to stay in the profession and look at other avenues. And however I can do that, I will do that.
I mean, I've seen some of your social media videos and things like that, and I absolutely love the short form content you put on Instagram and things, and making subjects like that are quite complex, like duty of candour, PSERF, things that actually you sort of start reading about, and it can go into pages and pages, and by the time you're halfway through it, you've sort of not realised what the beginning bit was. And the fact that you can condense that into these little short videos for people that are potentially going for roles that relate to these things is, I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't know how you get it into such short videos, but those platforms are fantastic for it.
Absolutely, they really are. And I think I was reading something recently, and it was saying something that a lot of people are turning to TikTok and Insta for their information, as well as Google, so it's using those platforms for the reach. And a lot of feedback that I get is, oh yeah, I watched you on TikTok, and I was just fascinated that I didn't know about this kind of information before. How can I understand what's going on in my organization? And for me, that's key, getting engaged within your organization, because I also hear, oh, I'm going to do my job and go home. Yeah. And it's really easy to get into that. But I always encourage, be engaged in what's happening within your organization. All the information you need to know about governance is there. It's just about accessing and being informed. So I also do really encourage that as well.
And that's it. Like with social media, I think a lot of people still see it as, it's a fun platform. It's, you can't actually get very good content on it, but actually you can. Everything around governance that you're doing and pushing out there, it's a really accessible way to get that then people can go, actually, if you're a busy parent as well as having a busy job as well as everything else, that if you can grab those in like little 5-minute chunks here and there, just listen to it, then I think it's such an important thing to be able to pick up and make accessible.
Yeah, and I also get a lot of student nurses as well saying that, oh, actually I haven't learned this, but this is really useful, and I can see how, it's good to know this from as early as being a student. And I said, absolutely, patient safety is everybody's concern. We should all have that in the forefront of our mind when we're looking after patients, when we're doing things. The feedback has been really, it motivates me to carry on, because I'm like, oh, okay, then some people are interested, I'll carry on. I'm going to put out my governance content and the assurances and what is risk and things like that, because I genuinely do feel the way kind of social media is evolving and how people are accessing information, I would like to put it at the forefront as well, as easy as possible if I can. And if that's creating, the 10, 20-second videos and condensing it down, then, I think that's really good.
I think as well it links nicely into, you've started blogs and things like that as well. And, we know there's an immense pressure on frontline workers in health and social care. And you've recently written a blog about nurses quitting quietly, which focuses on the pressure becoming too much. There was a recent survey at the International Council of Nurses that reported 43% are considering leaving their jobs. So how can we empower nurses to have a voice to speak up without the risk of, repercussion, create positive change? And I guess you touched on it at the very beginning about psychological safety. What can we do to promote that voice, that people feel comfortable enough to do this before they get to that point where they do want to quit?
That's a really, really good question. And the statistics, when I hear the statistics, then I think, wow, that's a high percentage. What can we do? I'm trying, just in the sense to show nurses that, it may be difficult and challenging potentially where you are, but don't quit. Don't give up your nursing pin. I know you've worked really hard for that, and I understand it's challenging. And for me, I don't advocate leave the bedside, because we need bedside nurses. I think that's really important. I'm an advocate of please don't leave the profession, and think about other avenues. And I think potentially it can be having representation in all levels. So, junior nurses, when I was a junior nurse, looking at, actually, I can be a chief nurse. I can do this, And I think that's important. And it may be a lack of, for some people, that they don't see themselves in these senior roles. And creating psychologically safe environments. We talk about it, we discuss it. It's not always easy, but I do feel it starts with the individual as well. We can put so much on, an organisation should do this and stuff, but what can I do? Can I speak to a manager? Can I speak to an employee resource group? Can I go there? It's accessing, tapping into communities and networks for support, I feel, is really important as well.
I think as well, speaking to people that might have gone through exactly the same thing. So, you might have someone as a chief nurse information officer, for example, now, but, 10 years ago, they might have gone, oh, I could never work in a digital space, or I could never do this, or, they've probably gone through it themselves. So I think having those open cultures to be able to chat to people that might have been in the same position as you, especially, you mentioned about student nurses and them accessing information, and understanding how people have got to the roles they've got, that, everybody knows that, nurses are passionate. That's a given, and that's such a big part of any role. If you're passionate about it and you work hard, you know where you want to get to, you'll achieve it. But it's just knowing who to talk to and how to access that, I think, as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. And, I was saying to the community of nurses, I was saying network, we don't really network as nurses, but it's so powerful, the power of networking, going to events, just talking to people and understanding, you're ahead of and so, can you tell me a bit about how you got there? And I do advise, I say network, do your research, look at job descriptions and see what's the person spec, and how can I kind of develop myself into being there. I really try and be as positive and just show that there's so much to healthcare for nurses to tap into.
Yeah. And that person spec is a really important part of it because, you know, again, you know, 20 years ago, it might have been very much based on skill set and that's it. Now, companies want the right people. They want the right attitude. They want the right cultural fit. There's so many more elements of it that actually sometimes the skill set, you know, obviously being nurse and there's certain qualifications, of course, you've got to have. But there might be others where they go, actually, you're the right fit, but we can put you on this progression plan and you can then learn, you know, the other bits that will then get you to the next step. So I think almost reminding people that that person bit within a job description it's there for a reason, really, isn't it?
It's so key, yeah. And I think it's navigating and telling people, actually, you know, go onto these platforms and look at these roles and see, you know, where are my strengths? Where are areas that I need to work on specifically? And just having a plan in place, because I think it's so important as well, especially to have a career goal.
Yeah.
And I always encourage that when I do to my one-to-ones, you know, what's your career goal? What's your 3-year plan? What's your 5-year plan? Okay, so how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
And I do advise a lot of the person spec. So you want to be a director of nursing? Okay, pull up a job spec and then let's go through it. And I do it that way, and it really opens, you know, our nurses' minds. And to be fair, actually, it's also nurses and midwives as well that reach out as well. So. Yeah, there's a lot happening in that space, but it's great.
I love that idea of doing it that way as well, because it's almost there in black and white then, and it becomes realistic and achievable instead of it being a bit of a, actually, I think I want to get to this, but it's a bit grey and I'm not quite sure about it. So I think seeing it in black and white on a job description is a really interesting way to look at how you can get there.
Yeah, it's impactful, you know, then they can align themselves and see themselves and, you know, the feedback that I get is that, I never even thought of doing that actually. You know, that's actually quite an interesting way of doing things. So yeah, I definitely do encourage it.
Yeah, and I think anyone can take that away from this episode as well, regardless of whatever industry you're in. It's a great skill to kind of do that. So the impact of language and terminology, I just want to have a little bit of a chat about this in the space. So the impact of language and terminology can have on the perception of a situation, I think, is really important. Traditionally, obviously, we know it's been a bit of a blame culture in the NHS, with people seeing recording of an incident, for example, as a blame thing, a finger pointing exercise. So what's your thoughts on how we can start to create a positive culture and how they can, you know, this can lead to positive outcomes for patient safety?
Language and terminology is crucial, and using it in a way that your message is articulated well is so important. Even myself, I've had to unlearn the things that I've learnt prior, and it just takes time. But it's also having awareness and having good connections and people around you to say, actually, maybe try saying it this way or doing it that way, because I think that will also create impact. I think we've been in kind of organizations and things, and sometimes you've learnt what's been passed down, but actually you can break the cycle and be the innovative one to champion change and use language that is positive and doesn't shift blame. Or things like that. So and I also do advocate that as well. I say, you know, we have to be mindful of the language that we use because everybody is under pressure. We should be a supporting network as much as possible, but also being aware of sometimes how language can impact that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're definitely right with that. You know, how people see recording an incident, for example. It's, you know, that's there to improve things, to potentially stop things happening in the future that might be the same thing, to realise that actually there's a real big issue in a particular place. So what do we put in place to stop that? Rather than it being a blame, actually we're doing that because we just want to, you know, tick a box or whatever it might be. I think it is creating that positive culture of, we're recording this incident to make sure it doesn't happen again, and therefore there's the impact on the patient at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you know, we have to remember these systems, you know, radar is in place in, you know, wherever organizations it is in to help support, promote create awareness and learn. How can we learn from things that are happening, from things potentially that didn't go to plan? And even I've come away from saying what went wrong, and saying actually what didn't go to plan, and it makes such a difference, because then I almost feel people will open up more when it's when the right language is involved is used in the right way as well.
Well, just that description you've just mentioned, it stops them becoming defensive straight away as well, doesn't it? If somebody's asking you what went wrong, the instant thing is to sort of go, well, actually, and you get defensive, whereas what didn't go to plan instantly feels like it's more conversational. It's more, well, actually, now I think about it, this is why it didn't happen, rather than that straight away defensive, I feel like I'm being blamed for something.
And that's where we need to get to, and it will take time. It will take time, but it's the awareness now that is happening. Oh, actually, let's use the right terminology to make, staff feel open to talk and have a conversation, and, just feel comfortable. It can be vulnerable for people when things don't go to plan, and sharing the information and sharing what happened. So I'm very big on that as well, definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, that leads us quite nicely into to have a little bit of a discussion about PSIRF. So obviously the new Patient Safety Incident Response Framework is due to be implemented this year at some point. What do you think you would like to see happen with this and sort of the positive effect it can have on patients in the future?
PSIRF, I'm doing a lot of work in PSIRF at the moment. I'm really enjoying just getting into it. And I'm interested to see how the culture will shift. I know it will take time, but I feel it's a pivotal movement within healthcare at the moment with the implementation of PSIRF. And if, we can kind of get it on the right tracks, I think the effects will be so long lasting and so worth it. And I'm really keen to see the cultural changes that come out from it. And I hope actually it will contribute to reducing health inequalities as well through, addressing systemic biases as and when they happen, and understanding that, we've got the learning responses and any investigations that need to happen, we cascade that information in a timely manner. So I'm definitely excited about PSIRF. I think everybody's like, why are you so excited about PSIRF? I was like, you don't know the impact that it will have on healthcare, when it's rolled out, and it's rolled out well. Yeah. And I like it because collectively, NHS, independent sector, we are moving towards PSIRF and having this framework as well. So I'm really keen to see the cultural changes specifically around this PSIRF.
I think that's the really interesting thing about PSIRF. It's not just another framework that, is going to get implemented and things don't change. There's such a big cultural change element of it that I think that is, you're right, I think it's really exciting from that point of view, because actually there's so many things we talk about when it comes to incident reporting or anything else that people are doing, that actually you go to the bottom of it and you go, the culture needs to change, and actually there's something potentially getting implemented now that is going to get to the bottom of changing that. And you're right, it's not going to happen overnight, it's going to take time, but actually if that's going to improve patient outcomes in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years time, it's got to be worth doing it.
Absolutely. And I just like how we're all on the journey of PSIRF. And, I tap into networks and hear what's happening, across the country. And I'm genuinely excited about what's going to happen with PSIRF and how we're going to bring this in. And hopefully, having the cultural element of change, but it takes everybody to understand and get it, get on board with PSIRF, essentially. So it's not going to be easy, it's not going to be easy, but it will so be worthwhile.
Yeah. The easy things in life are always,
it's true.
I mean, that kind of conversation about, something being implemented at the moment, brand new, it's going to be different. What's your thoughts on, obviously, this year is 75 years of the NHS. What's your thoughts on kind of what's changed and, even in the time you've been in the industry, and what you kind of want to see in the future, whether it's, achievable or not? What is the ideal that you'd really like to see?
I would like to see, carry on being an engaged workforce despite the challenges. I love connecting with student nurses, band 5, band 6, just nurses and midwives in general, actually. And I'm intrigued to understand and hear how they will contribute to the next, 75 years. And I think it's interesting in the sense that lots is happening, lots of change is happening, but how can we ensure we still have an engaged workforce despite the challenges?
Yeah, there's so many roles as well now, isn't there?
Many.
You think about how digital's transformed things over the last 10, 15 years, and where that can potentially go in another 10, 15 years, and the new roles that it's almost helping to create. That there's so many doors that could open for different people in the industry as well. So you might have never thought about going into nursing, but actually with all these different elements of things like governance and patient safety, there's so many ways that you can go down, which I think is a really exciting thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's what will the careers be like? What are the doors that's going to be opened from informatics, digital health? So it'll be really interesting to see over the next couple of years. Yeah, long couple of years, but what's going to happen? How are our nurses going to be the leaders? The nurses that I connect with who are student nurses, they're hopefully going to be our directors, our heads of. So how we pave the way to ensure that they get to where they want to be. So I'm really intrigued to see that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I'm sure we've got lots of people listening who would want to find out more about the support available, how they can develop. So what's your top tips for nurses that want to start and look at these opportunities, and where do you think they could, where do they start, basically?
Where do they start? Good question. I always advise to write a plan. And in your plan, and I mentioned before, what's your 3 to 5 year goal? And write it down, because I always believe having a vision and seeing it and putting it up, you're more likely to achieve it. So, write your plan down and then SWOT. Where are your strengths, weakness, where are your opportunities, where potentially could you see some challenges, and then work through that, and then get your person spec and look through a person spec and see, okay, actually, I need to map out my skills, my experience. What do I need to do? So a lot of that can be done, when you've got a moment, some downtime, some time to yourself to plan. So I always encourage, write your plan down and have a look and review on a timely basis, review it and say, am I on track to become who I want to become in 3-5 years? And constantly review as well.
Yeah. I think that's a great advice, definitely, for anyone to take away. So, at the end of every episode of What the Health Tech, we ask for everybody's What the Health Tech moment. So we've been doing the podcast for a while now. We've had some amazing stories, from the weird and wonderful, from the emotional, from the really strange. But I'd like to ask you what your What the Health Tech moment is.
What the Health Tech moment? I'd have to say opening a hospital during COVID times. Yes, and it was very sudden in terms of when, we were all kind of told to kind of work from home. But essentially I was on the project for Cleveland Clinic London, and yes, we were told that, we have to work remotely. And for me, it's like, wow, we're gonna open a hospital or attempt to open a hospital, but work in the background to getting it all started in and finished. My role specifically was a CQC application, registration, and developing that project plan. So it is, how can I create a timeline around a timeline I'm not sure of because of the impact of COVID. But we did it. Worked with a fantastic team to do it, but I always think back and think, wow. And being, as Cleveland Clinic is such a digitally advanced hospital as well, the intricacies of the digital space and mapping and weaving that in, and you couldn't necessarily always be on site. That I look back and think, wow, we all did it collectively, and I feel so honoured to be part of it, but it was really, wow.
I mean, that is an incredible achievement. I mean, it was difficult enough, I think, for people to all of a sudden adapt to obviously it being such a big change for everyone. But to be in that process and to still achieve it and have to, I guess you had to change like ways of working and all sorts to be able to do that. And it's such a, like you just said, it's such a collective thing to do as well. How do you all of a sudden kind of get that collectiveness without all being in the same room together all of the time as well? Yeah,
absolutely. And we did so much as a team and even as an organisation remotely. And that's the ethos and you know, how we've kind of had to come together. But it was really interesting times at that time. I can assure you, trying to open a hospital and, you know, contributing in that space and not being able to see it, see the progress, or me personally, it is my what the health tech moment.
I think it's a fantastic what the health tech moment. And I mean, I don't work, I'm not a nurse, I don't work directly in the hospital environment, but I've taken away some stuff from this in terms of how I can develop myself and, and my career and things as well. So it's been a brilliant episode and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody else for listening, as always. Join us for another new episode in a couple of weeks' time. Don't forget to rate and subscribe. And if you have any questions for us or our guests, please email whatthehealthtech@radarhealthcare.com.